Assalamualaikum viewers. Welcome to my YouTube channel BS English Lectures. In my today's video, I am going to tell you about three basic topics which are being discussed in literature. First one is relationship of literature with life. Second one is literature and society. The third one is literature and morality. So we are going to discuss them one by one. Before starting my discussion, first of all, I want to say if you like my video, do subscribe my channel, click the bell icon and do like comment in the comment section below. So let's have a start with the very first topic, which is relationship of literature and life. There is an ultimate connection between literature and life, as we all know that it is in fact life which is the subject matter of literature, because literature is drawn from life, because life provides raw material on which literature imposes an artistic form. Okay, so but this is a connection between literature and life is not so simple as it seems. This problem has been discussed by some of the great literary critics of the world, and their conclusion have been sometimes contradictory. So this is a big problem. This is continuously under discussion that what is the relationship of literature with the life. So now in this video I am going to discuss some of the critics, philosophers which have their views on literature and life. So first one is Plato. He is known as a critic. The great Greek philosopher was the first to give a serious thought to this problem, the relationship of literature to life. In his discussion, he refers mainly to poetry, but what he said about poetry can be equally applied to literature as a whole. Basically, he regards poetry as a merry imitation of life, and thus he condemned the poet. His opposition to the poetry is based on his theory of knowledge. He opposed poetry. Okay, he regards that literature, or we can say poetry, is the merry imitation of life. It imitates life. Okay, according to him, true reality consists in the ideas of things of which individual objects are but reflection or imitation. So he give an example I am going to tell you about, that he says that when we say a black dog, a good dog, a lame dog, etc., we are comparing the dog which we actually see with our real eye with the ideal dog. We are comparing the actual dog with the ideal dog, our idea of the dog which is the true. The idea is real, but and while the dog which we name as black, good, lame, etc., that is the merry reflection of imitation of that reality. So he says that idea is real, true reality consists in the idea. Secondly, he compare the imitation with the poetry painter, sorry. He says that painter only imitates what he sees and does not know how to make or to use what he sees. He could paint a bat but not make it. So a poet imitates the reality, the real existent thing. Poet imitates the things that are really exist without understanding it, without making it. He does not make the bed, he just imitates the bed which is really exists in front of him. So this is his philosophy, his idea on literature and life. So literature or poetry as a whole is an imitation and thus twice removed from truth. So this is the philosophy of Plato on literature and life. So there we have another philosopher and a great moralist, Aristotle. He could not see clearly the relation between the literature and life. He says about Plato. He is right when he said that the poet produced something which is less than reality, but he does not perceive that he also creates something more than reality. He Aristotle is basically the student of Plato, so he denied the concept of Plato and described that the poet is an imitation of what, not what might be or ought to be. Okay, so he says that he imitates. He perceived that he also creates something more than reality. This error was corrected by Plato's pupil Aristotle. So, in his Poetics, he undertook to examine the nature and qualities of imaginative literature with a view of demonstrating that it is true and not false as Plato had shown it. He agreed with Plato that poetry is an imitation of reality, but according to him, this imitation is the object representation of life in literature, or, in other words, the imaginative reconstruction of life. So, poetry is thus not connected with the outside world in the simple and direct fashion supposed by Plato, but he says that the poet first derives an inspiration from the world by the power of his imagination. The art of poetry then imitates this imaginative inspiration in language. So, this is the view of Aristotle on response to Plato's. So, he says that now it is just possible to imagine life exactly as it is, but the exciting thing is to imagine life as it might be. It might be, okay, and it is then that imagination become an imperceptible of inspiring poetry. He says that it is just possible to imagine life exactly as it is, but the exciting thing is to imagine life as it might be. It might to be, okay. This is the view of Aristotle. He further says that imagination may no more than concentrate the actuality by dropping out all its insignificant passages, but that will be enough to make the resultant poetry or literature something different from the copy of the world which Plato's condemnation assumed it to be. Okay, this was Aristotle's reply to Plato. So he also says that the poet is concerned with truth, but not the truth of the analyst, the historian, or the photographer. So he says the poet's business is not to write of events that have happened, but of what may be happened. Poet basically write not what is happening, but also what is going to be happen. What is going to be, what is possibilities. He write about possibilities of things that are possible in the light of probability or necessity. Okay, for this reason the poetry is a more philosophical, a more serious thing than history. He says that poetry is more philosophical, a more serious thing than history, because history deals with the particular events, particular subjects, etc. But poetry deal with principle of poetic unity, poetic truth with the universal truth. That poetic truth is that he has an idea of the existing world, what is happening in front of him, but the universal truth is that what is going to be happen further. Okay, this is the view of Aristotle on relationship of literature and life, and he denies the concept of um, clearly present the concept of Plato, which he give in his poetics. When Plato, when Aristotle and Plato both are arguing about what is the relationship of literature and life, we have another critique which is known as Sir Philip Sidney. Aristotle thus meet Plato's charge that poetry is imitation of an imitation by showing that the poet, by concerning himself with fundamental possibility, probability, rather than with casual actualities, reaches more deeply into the reality than the analyst and or the historian. So, Sir Philip Sidney, who next took the question of the relationship of literature and life, also refuted Plato's connection, contention that literature is a merry imitation of an imitation. According to Sir Philip Sidney, the poet does not imitate, but he creates. According to Philip Sidney, poet is a one who creates. He does not imitate. It is the reader who imitates. He called poet a creator and he called reader as a imitator. Okay, this is the view of Sir Philip Sidney. For Sidney, the ideal world of the poet is of value because it is a better world than the real world, and it is presented in such a way that the reader is stimulated to try and imitate it in his own practice. So, he says that the ideal world of the poet is of more value because it presents the world in a better way than that of real world. But real world is presented. Okay, he present the world in a very player manner. Okay, this is the view of Sir Philip Sidney. Coming up with our next personality, which is known as Dr. Dryden. So, so there we have the views of Dr. Johnson, and second one is Dryden. Dr. and Dryden views that the problem of the literature's relationship of life was next taken up by Dryden, who pointed out that imaginative literature give us a just and lively image of a nature of the human, representing its patience and humor. Dryden was on the view that the imaginative literature basically give us a lively element in the nature of human by representing his passion and humors, by representing through patience and humors. Okay, this point was further developed by Dr. Johnson. What he says, he expressed the view that the poet holds up a mirror to nature. This is the point which is given by Dr. Johnson. According to him, nothing can please many and please long lasting pleasure is given is taken by but just representation of general nature. He says that the long lasting pleasure is just taken through general nature. He also further says, Dr. Johnson, that the poet must know the manners and the custom of men of all times and conditions, not because it is his duty to make vivid the reader the different ways in which men have lived and behaved. He used to say that the poet must know the manner and customs and manners, the behavior and the custom and manners of different society, all the times, all the conditions in which man lives and behave according to the condition and according to the environment. This is the view of Dr. Johnson on relationship of literature and life. He says that literature is merely a mirror to nature. Poet holds up a mirror to nature. So these are four philosophers which I have discussed now under the topic of literature and life. Now come across our next topic, which is relationship of literature and society. Basically, literature is intimately related to society. Viewed as whole, a body of literature is part of the entire culture of people. The characteristics quality that distinguish the literature of one group from that of another derive from the characteristic quality of that group. So its themes and problems emerge from group activities and group situations. So here it is clear that the theme of the literature arises from the qualities of that group activities and group situations, and its significance lie in the extent to which it expresses and enriches the totality of culture. Society consists of culture, revolve around culture, around people, around groups of people. So it is an integral part of entire culture, tied by a tissue of connections with every other element in the culture. Literature is an integral part of entire culture, ties by a tissue, tied by a tissue of connections with every other element in culture. Society influences literature in many ways. So these are our following ways through which society influence culture. Because the relationship between literature and society is highly complex, and it is very difficult to determine which element of society is influencing what influencing on literature. So these are the following society elements which influence or we have to see in the literary works of the author. First is social organization. Second is class structure. Different classes: upper class, middle class, lower class, elite class, etc. Economic system. Fourth one is political organization. Fifth one is dominant ideas of that time, of that particular time. Which ideas, which thought, which conversations are dominant at that time, at that particular era. Dominant languages, different languages, variations in the languages in different areas. The use of the dominant languages of the particular area era. Sense of past and patterns of contemporary realities. Past influence our present. So we must know the sense of past. We must have sense of past and patterns of contemporary realities in the literature, and we take it from the society. This is all about literature and society. Now move on our third topic and the last topic, which is literature and morality. There are basically two schools of thoughts holding opposite views about literature or art in general. First view is the view of moralist, or we can say Puritan. Second are aesthetics. What moralist says about literature and morality, art in general? He says that writer does and inevitably does influence the lives and character of his reader. He is on the view that writer influence the writer impact influence on the reader, characters, and lives, as remarked by Walter Pater. He says that he is an English aestheticism. So he is on the view that some moods of passion or insight or intellectual excitement is irresistibly real and attractive for us. For that movement only, not the fruit of experience, but experience itself is the end. He says that experience, not the experience, but the experience itself is the end. So there is another writer which is known as Oscar Wilde. He is the heir of Peters. Oscar Wilde, who went a good deal further, he remarks that there is no such thing as a moral or immoral book. Books are written or badly written. He is the view on that the books are written or badly written. That is all, according to Oscar Wilde. No artist has ethical sympathies. An ethical sympathy in an artist is an unpardonable mannerism. He says that the ethical empathy is in an artist is unpardonable, unforgivable mannerism. All art is quite useless. This is what Puritan, or we can say moralists, are on the view that the writer does and inevitably does influence the lives and characters of his reader. On the other hand, aesthetics, they are on the view that the writer cannot influence his reader. Opposite view. For reader and writer, literature is a wine for player value matters. He is on the view that for writer and reader, the literature is known as a wine. According to him, literature, according to their views, that literature is a wine and player for writer and the reader. In England, the theory of art for art's sake did not move fast, but the theory of art for art's sake come into prominence in the 19th century in France, but it was uh, demolished or it was drawn back in England and did not move further and fast so far as in France, though it went quite far enough. On the other hand, the protagonist of theory that literature or art has a moral purpose are of a far larger number than those who believe in the art for art's sake theory. And thus, as the Wordsworth remarked, that I am nothing if not a teacher. So, art for art's sake protagonists are less than that of the moral of the value. Moralists are more emphasized than that of art for art's sake. So, that is all for today. I have discussed with you three relation of literature and life, literature of relationship of literature with society and morality. That is all. So if you like my video, do like, comment, and subscribe my channel. Click the bell icon and follow my next videos on literature further. Inshallah, and have a good day. Allah Hafiz.